What is up, nerds? Today, we are going to take a little bit of a detour. We're not going to talk about the Yang mayoral campaign. I might do an update on that one later on this weekend or in a couple of days. If you really want it sooner, let me know in the comments or in the chat. But this one is going to be about COVID. What is it like to go into a classroom that is poorly ventilated, or a restaurant for that matter? And then if we have time, we'll probably look at also the prevalence of new mutations, and are we kind of out of the woods or not? But before, let's warm it up with Andrew.
Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up with. Drew Yang Gang, that's who I hooked up. Yo, there's no place to hide now that he's arrived. I'm saying he ain't playing now with this campaign. Bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll.
Hello, nerds! Nerds for humanity. My goodness, it's been a while. I don't know about you guys. I have been super busy. We've had, in my day job, performance reviews, which includes promotion committee and all that kind of fun stuff. I'm still working on my taxes. I have to do both U.S. and Swiss taxes. Volunteering a lot for ofthepeople.us. If you don't know about it, check it out. It's super cool. And helping my mom relocate from Florida to California. But I just did a bunch of taxes, and I was like, my brain was fried. And I was like, I need something for myself. So I said, let's do a Nerds live stream with some data visualization. I don't know about you, man, but that's what I call having a party, nerd style. So the New York Times did this really cool breakdown of how virus gets kind of traded in indoor spaces. And given all of the talk about reopening restaurants, reopening schools. Some states are doing it with 100% capacity and no social distancing or masks. I'm looking at you, Texas and Mississippi. I thought I'd just kind of share with everybody a little bit of how that stuff impacts all of us who are living in those states. And hopefully you'll see this and it'll be useful for you. Let's take a look at that visualization. And in the chat, let me know where you're joining from as well. And don't forget to like and share if you're finding this useful. Okay. So, hold on a second. Boom. Let's now go to the importance of ventilation. Now, this is done. Let's give credit where credit's due by the New York Times. And I'm going to put a link in the chat in case any of you guys want to check it out for yourselves. But that's where this is coming from. And the basic gist is that opening windows, if you drop your kid off to school, if school's reopening, make sure they've got windows open. If you go into a restaurant, you may want to ask them to ensure that the windows are open. This is a typical classroom pre-pandemic. And in the wintertime, the windows are going to be closed, and you're going to see a lot of people packed in, almost looking at it right now. I don't know what state you guys are in, but if I were in my state, which is the state of California, the Golden State, and I saw that many people packed in, I would be a little concerned. But I have seen, I think in Florida and Texas, they're partying like it's 1999. And you know, that's the choice that they've made. So now let us now dig in. Oh, look how cool this is. This is, you gotta. I know former President Trump liked to call this the failing New York Times, but I love some of the work they do. So here, New York City put protocols for reopening schools, and they have to be distanced and wearing masks. So you see the desks here are 6 feet apart, and you see the little animated people are wearing masks. So that looks a little bit better than the, let's call this the Florida, Texas approach. And this is the New York City approach. Now, if we look further, this is how the air flows amongst them, even when people are fairly distanced. And, I don't know about you, but right, even just glancing at this, you're like, ooh, that is some sharing of air. It's like someone breathing into your mouth, right? And in theory, it should be limited. I guess it would be worse if they weren't wearing masks, but this is what it looks like. Now, we're going to see here, the students are wearing masks, but their breath still circulates and mixes around the room. And about 3% of the air each person in this room breathes came out of the mouth or nose of someone else sitting in the room. So, it's not most, but 3%, something to think about. Now, we're going to dig a little deeper. Now, let's say we have an infected student. This individual here is infected. Now, they are wearing a mask. Now, students who look healthy may be asymptomatic carriers who can transmit the virus. And here, you've got one guy sitting here, breathing in and out. And then you got the rest. 3% of the air they're breathing comes from someone else. It may not be from that infected student. So let's see what happens. Okay, now this is the air coming out of the infected student's nose and mouth. And this, again, is assuming that they're wearing the mask correctly. I've noticed a lot of people like to pull the mask under their nose because it's easier to exhale. But that kind of defeats the whole purpose of wearing a mask, just as a public service announcement. Also, if you have a mask with vents that allow you to breathe out more easily, that also defeats the whole purpose, because if you're breathing out through a unfiltered vent, or a one-way vent, you're actually spreading potentially asymptomatically or worse to other people. But this is here the infected student. And yes, Jekalago, that is pretty intense even with masks. And you see over time, that person's breath accumulates. And we still don't know exactly what level of contamination presents the greatest risk of infection. But it is a function of concentration and time. So the more of that person's breath you take into your body and the longer period of time you do it, that's probably going to increase your risk. So if you're sitting in a class, or if you're sitting, in a long dinner in a big room, and, there's a lot of people breathing, and even if they're distanced, you see that there is an introduction and a mixing of everybody's air, right? You're basically trading air with everybody else in the room. And as you can see, over time, that person's breath, approaches its peak level of contamination with little fresh air coming into the space. Those contaminants continue to kind of envelop everyone else. And, well, it depends how long that class is, but if he keeps breathing and exhaling, it's going to mix. So, experts agree that the good ventilation is the most effective and practical way to rid a space of contaminants. Doesn't mean there's going to be none, but it's going to lower the concentration. And the Healthy Buildings Program recommends 4 to 6 air exchanges per hour through a combination of ventilation and filtration. So if you live in a state where a governor is saying like, oh, it's time to liberate our state and it's about freedom or whatever, you may want to ask that governor like, oh, are the schools having 6 air exchanges per hour? Are the restaurants that you're saying should be reopened immediately for indoor dining, are they getting 6 air exchanges per hour? So is all the air kind of turning over basically every 10 minutes. So here in this visualization, we now open the window. And what happens? Okay, infected student, still infected. He's still exhaling, but as you can see, it is enveloping everyone else, but it's sort of enough of it is turning over and getting mixed outside and fresh, clean air is coming in, that it's not nearly this, which is, kind of tough for that teacher and most of the students. I mean, this dude in the back corner might be the safest because he's kind of furthest away, but he's still breathing in a little bit as well. So that's kind of a good way to kind of visualize how useful it is to do what? To open a window. Not asking a lot. Now, if you add a simple air cleaner with a HEPA filter and a box fan blowing fresh air into the room, both are very practical and low cost. And this is part of what President Biden is trying to do with the stimulus, to provide schools with funds to introduce these mitigations. And here we have infected student, but now we have a fan blowing fresh air in. And he's still exhaling. It's still getting around the teacher, but not nearly as bad because you've got all of this fresh air coming in and then all the nasty air kind of getting pushed out eventually. And then you also have an air cleaner. Oh, yeah, this dude in the back, he's like, yeah, man, I'm far away from the infected guy. I've got the fresh air blowing in, and I got this clean air filtering it out. So that's another question for your governor. If you live in one of those states that, really believe that it's time to reopen, I think everybody wants to reopen. Just let's make sure we're doing it safely. And the question is like, oh, okay, well, you want to reopen. You want restaurants to have full capacity. Like, are restaurants required to have ventilation, to have fans, to have air cleaners? It's not as simple as just sort of saying the words freedom. Okay. Airflow is one way to understand the importance of ventilation, but we can also look at the data another way. Okay, let's look at another way. Here is a view of the same classroom with the window closed. Each layer shows a full cross-section of the space once the room has reached a peak level of contamination. Ooh. So this is kind of dividing up the room into kind of little squares. And with the window closed, the contaminants accumulate in high concentrations because they have nowhere to go. So they just kind of hang around, and he keeps exhaling into the room. And it's just kind of, it's like a fog of virus. Now, the concentrations are highest where the warm air rises, but contaminants are also spreading at the level where students are breathing. Okay? So it is a little bit higher where it's warmer, but it still, after a while, kind of settles down. And here's the overhead view. The students like exhaling, it's kind of accumulating in this corner, and then it starts spreading around, hits this guy over here, starts hitting this student over here, and this student back here. The dense reddish fog shows a high concentration of contaminants spreading far beyond 6 feet from the infected student. If the student were sitting elsewhere, the pattern would be different, but the buildup in the room would be similar. So 6 feet is great. It prevents you from, or reduces the likelihood of you just like getting some mouth-to-mouth air. But if you're in an enclosed room with no ventilation, home slice is going to start spreading. Now, with the window open, the concentration remains densest near the infected student, but the contaminants are diluted in the rest of the room. So exposure for the rest of the students is definitely reduced. So you could be like this, closed, or like this, window open. And with an air cleaner and a fan, the overall concentration is the lowest. The contaminants are concentrated at the front of the room where the fan is blowing and diluted everywhere else. Now, of course, if you're that teacher and you're standing around here, that's still not ideal. But this is why we want our teachers to get vaccinated soon, as soon as possible. But you can see how it's a very big difference from this scenario. I mean, this scenario, it's like a giant petri dish. And here, it's bad. It's definitely bad, you know, but it's better. Now, though we achieved 6 air exchanges with these measures, there are ways we could further improve ventilation in this space. So here, you could have a fan blowing out the window. We don't want to ever blow air across someone's face, right? And since our open window and fan are in the front of the room, we place the air cleaner in the back for balance. When you don't know the airflow patterns, it's generally best to put the air cleaner in the center of the room if you don't know the airflow pattern. And here we have the fan blowing out. We don't have the fan blowing into your face, because then you could be downwind of infected dude or gal. So, at any rate, these simulations offer examples on specific inputs, the importance of ventilation and filtration. That was pretty crazy stuff, huh, guys? I thought that was super cool. I hope you did too. Now, I do have some more data around mutations and the new mutation either from UK or Brazil or South Africa, and then there's another one in Oregon. I will show you that in a minute, but before I do that, I do want to take a second to thank some of the people that make this channel possible. And so let's go here and give a quick shout out to our channel members. And if you're finding this content useful and you haven't clicked that join link, oh, Nell just joined. Hello, nerds. Go ahead and hit that join link, because that money goes to investing in the streaming software that I'm using now, the podcast hosting fees, and then promotion of the channel so we can grow the audience and attract more big-time kind of interviews. So let's start with our highest level member support. It's our vice presidents. We have V Lamb, JM Sap, Fat Lamb, Kristen Slevin, Soldier One, Laura Lane, Patrick Dunn, Bike, and Mindful Skeptics. So thank you to all of our VPs. And next level down, we have our hardcore. We have Mike Chang, Gene Lim, David, Tracy, DK, Phoenix, Jekalego, who I think is in the room right now, Kirsch, Mr. History Fan, Byram Hess, Mona, Susan Yang, Tony, Robert, Dean, Statner, Galessa, Jalesa, Jay Perrin, Annalisa, and Jay Bryan Anderson. So those are our hardcore nerds. And then we have our verified level. Helen, Lisa, Sugar, Albert, Brandon, Yes, Brian, Peter, Arez, Your Mommin, Sophia, Jadwiga, Gail, Shake and Make, Mike, Doris, Emerald, Nell, Lori, Ben, Rogers, Lisa, Christina, Vaughn, Rasta, Richard, Jessica, James, Jalopy, Emma, Spirited, Hui, Stephen, Ira, Shoni, Spy, Philip, Jameson, Dr. A, William. Skipped. We were left at William. Karen, Monica, Ender, Alex, Ardent, Mai, Semery, Brittany, and Clyde. And let me just give a shout out to our newest members overall. Total time as member minimum. That would be Clyde and Brittany, who are less than 30 days old, so welcome. Now, let us look at some of the new mutations. And here's an interesting chart. On the right-hand side is a chart that I think a lot of us have been watching, which is the total number of cases. Oh, did Want to See More become a member? Dude, hold up now. I loves it. I loves it. Hold on. I'm going to have to give Want to See More a little welcome bell. Welcome to the Nerd Zone, Want to See More. Welcome. Welcome, my brother or sister. Oh, hello, even Andrew's welcoming you. Even Andrew welcomed you. See, if you join, or you do a super chat, you do membership, stuff happens. Or if you subscribe, there's a good chance you may get a little action from Andrew. Okay, now let's go back to the mutations. Mutations. Okay, so everybody's looking at this one. This was like when we peaked in early Jan, and then it's been coming down really nicely. I think this is a combination of people taking masking and distancing and working from home when they can really seriously. And it has flattened off, though. Like, it's not coming down as much as it was. So that's something to be concerned about. Like, it's not crashing down. If you were to look here at, let's see, COVID case numbers. You see here, this is California. Let's say show all. Okay, we're now at around 65,000 new cases a day in America, which is way less than 250,000 new cases a day back in December. Remember during the election, there was an individual who was saying, oh, you know, come first week of November, COVID, you're never going to hear about COVID again because it's just a big hoax to make Donald Trump look bad. And look at the cases, just even after election day, kept going up. Almost 300,000. We peaked on January 8th with 300,000 new cases. So, yes, now we're at 60,000. But that's actually still more than the fall, September, October, when it was closer to like 30, 40, 50,000. So, yes, we are doing better than we were, but we're definitely not. This is not like some all-time record in terms of our COVID out of the woodsness. And if you look at death rate, here the death rate is still darn near 2,000 people died. Oh, shoot. No, actually, over 2,000, 2,483 people died on March 5th. Is that less than the 3,000 that died on January 16th or the 4,000 that died on January 12th? Yes. Yes, it is. But it's still more than the 700 people that died in October. So in the fall, we were like, oh, someday we're going to have over 1,000 dead. And then we peaked at 4,400 on January 12th. And then, but now we're down to 1,700 dead, dying per day. Still, like, not out of the woods. What's also concerning, where's your, Dana saying, where's your link to donate to the Yang? Let me just answer that in chat. That is tinyurl.com/nerds-nyc. So I'm going to put that in the chat. Hold on a second. Ooh, did I just change? I think I did, but whatever. So that's now in the chat, tinyurl.com/nerds-nyc. That's how you can donate to Andrew through our link, and then we get credit. All the money goes to Andrew, the matching, everything works fine. But if we can raise enough money for him, I want to get Andrew on. I want to look at some charts together with Andrew, breaking down the nuances of what ails New York City and maybe some of the opportunities. But I promise you, if we get Andrew back on this channel, it will not be your normal interview. It's going to be a Nerds for Humanity style interview, and we're gonna whip out like major data visualization. So donate to Andrew through our link. Don't go directly to his site. He'll get all the money, but I want to get the credit so that I could be like, bro, the Nerds audience has given you a lot of muns. You need to get up on the Nerds stream, and we need to look at some charts together, brother. All right. So, so the red line going down, still higher than the fall. So don't think everything's fine. But look at this blue line, the B117 variant, which used to be like 1% of all cases. And now it's about over 20%, and you can see this blue line over here. This is the number of B117 cases, and that has not gone down at all, this blue line down here. Now, the B117 variant was first identified in Brazil and another one in South Africa. And the concern is that this is going to be a little bit more contagious, so it transmits a little bit faster, and it may actually be a little bit harder to recover and may have a higher mortality rate. So this is why, if you have friends who are like, oh, I'm tired of this pandemic. It's like, yeah, we're all tired, bro. All tired. But look at the numbers. We're not out of the woods. So freaking, we're making progress. Don't prematurely reopen your state and tell everybody to kind of pack into small enclosed indoor areas. That ain't a good idea. Don't do that. All right. This is the number of cases that we've sequenced. So this is where you could argue we are not doing as good of a job as we probably should in terms of tracking all of the variations across the country. There are certain states that are doing really well, like Washington State and Seattle and UW are pretty good. Wyoming, Maine, in terms of percent of their cases sequenced, is pretty good. Mississippi, Tennessee, Oklahoma, really terrible at doing the genomic sequencing of the cases that they're observing. You know, the UK has sequenced about 8% of its cases. And as you can see here, we are about 1% in Feb and about 3% in the last 2 weeks. So our friends in the UK, they may not have had their famous Operation Warp Speed, but they are taking this very, very seriously, and I think they're actually inoculating people at a higher rate than we are as well. So there you have it. The highest is Hawaii, that has sequenced 3.5%, and the worst state is the state of Tennessee, where they've only sequenced 0.05% of their cases. Washington State has a lot of cases and has done a lot of sequencing. California has done 0.63% of its more than 3.5 million cases. So there you have it. And then here is a look state by state of both the total case count and the B117 share. And then underneath the total case count, you can see the B117 number of cases as well. So you look at Florida, which is under the leadership of Governor DeSantis, you see that they are well over 20% of their cases are now of the mutation that is more transmissible and a little bit potentially harder to recover from. And you can see their total case count has come down and started leveling off. But the number of B117 cases seems to be growing. So be careful when you think about Florida. Where else are you seeing the blue spike? Georgia. See, Georgia, you see here, very big spike in B117 cases. And it probably looks like, yeah, it's about maybe 20% of all of their cases. Who's doing well? Let's see. This B117 seems to be very, well, California's doing okay. So you see California B117 cases have kind of flattened, although, you know, there are parts of California like LA, Orange County, where they're not really taking the mitigation as seriously as, let's say, we are in Northern California. No offense to our friends in Southern California, but I think if you look at the numbers, there's way more spread. But overall, as a state level, California has managed to hold that B117 mutation down a little bit. I mean, if you compare California and Florida, you can see this is what Governor DeSantis has done, and this is what Governor Newsom has done. Now, look, I know a lot of people don't think Gavin Newsom is very popular. I don't have a strong opinion about him, but if you judge people by their results and if you measure them on B117 spread, the guy who's running this state has not done a very good job. The guy who's running this state is doing okay-ish. Nothing to write home about. If you look at Texas, Texas is now almost off the charts in terms of their B117 mutation as a percentage. And you can see here it's probably close to a third of total Texas cases. And what's interesting is this is exactly the time when Texas is saying they don't need to have mask mandates. They don't need to have maximum occupancy for restaurants and indoor facilities. Where has the B117 been detected? You've got the B117 is basically national. I mean, this is the power of a pandemic and how quickly it spreads. I remember there was a time where people were just talking about it being in the UK. This is the P1 in a few states. This is the B1 351. So you see that there's just basically a little bit of a diversity, and I think I read in the news there was a new mutation in Oregon. In Oregon, that basically has gotten even. I think it's even more resistant to vaccines. So hopefully everybody's going to be really careful out there. I know I've been talking for about half an hour. If you found this information useful, can you please do me a solid and like and share? It definitely helps the channel, helps me, helps people find out more about what's going on. And the only other thing I think I'll cover for this stream is if you have any questions for me, now is a great time. So let's do an Ask Me Anything. And while I wait for questions to come in, I'll see if I can pull any more information on that new Oregon mutation that was just talked about in the news this morning. Let's see. Let's see how the vaccine rollout is going while I'm waiting for questions. If there are no questions in the chat, we'll wrap it up. But here is a good example. Not there. Here. Hold on. Here is a good example of where the vaccinations are going really well, where there's at least been one dose. It looks like California has 18% with one dose. Florida has 16.6%. Texas has 14.6%. Who's doing the best? Credit to South Dakota for 23%. North Dakota, 21%. Probably smaller population doesn't hurt. New Mexico, 25%. Kudos, New Mexico. Arizona, 18. Connecticut, 23. And Massachusetts, 20. So that's pretty impressive. Now, if you look at which states are kind of fully vaccinated, where people have gotten both shots, kudos to New Mexico with 14% at 2 doses, Oklahoma 11%, Montana, some of these smaller population states. West Virginia, 12% have had both shots. Florida, only 9% have had 2 doses, and California, only 8% have had 2 doses. Texas, only 8% have had 2 doses. So, you know, we have to keep our foot on the pedal in terms of getting people these jabs. Hopefully the Johnson & Johnson stuff will be a step in the right direction. This is the number of doses administered per day. And you see that back in January, we're doing a few 100,000 a day. And then it's been climbing very nicely. And right now we're at, 2 million doses a day for a 7-day average. And on March 6th, we had 2.9 million. So if we get to 3 million doses a day in a month, we'll have, 90 million people at least with their first shot, which would be a third of the country. So exciting stuff there. And when a given share of the population may at least be partially vaccinated. So at the current pace, we'll get to our 70% herd immunity on July 22nd, which isn't terrible. But that does require everyone to get your freaking shot. So please go out and do it if you have access to it. And then we already compared the states briefly. And then who's eligible? California, you're still in the 65 and older. But if you're in Wyoming, if you're just 50 and older, you can get it. Mississippi, 50 and older. West Virginia, 50 and older. So that's pretty cool. All right, so let me go back to the default view here. Okay. I did want to talk. Oh, we have a question from Blake. What do you think of the single dose vaccine? I would say if you can get it, get it. If you have a choice, it's hard to say because the very impressive numbers that Moderna and Pfizer had were done on tests that were run earlier in the year before we had these mutations. Whereas the Johnson & Johnson one dose, they did tests like, I think they included people in South Africa. So you could argue, the Johnson & Johnson one-shot one is perhaps has been tested in a more demanding environment than the Moderna and Pfizer ones. But, at this point, I would say get whatever you can get. If you have a choice, it's hard to say. Part of it also depends on your likelihood of getting both shots for Pfizer and Moderna. Like, if you don't think you can get off work and have both shots, then that's another point in favor of the Johnson & Johnson one. Or, the Johnson & Johnson one, if you want something that's been tested very aggressively with demanding conditions against death, then you could argue Johnson & Johnson in a way has more compelling data than Moderna and Pfizer. So, they're both, I think right now just get the shot. Whatever you can get your hands on it. Yeah. I don't think there's a I think what I can tell you is that not getting any of the three is a bad move. That's my opinion. Okay, one last thing I want to talk about was I got into a little bit of trouble on Twitter because I said, hey, and I'd be curious what you guys think in the chat and in the comments. I said, if a state rolls back its COVID mitigation efforts, like rolls back its mask mandates, rolls back its social distancing requirements, and made everything voluntary and said, well, Texans can make decisions for themselves. Knowing that, in this case, Texas's B117 mutation is growing at a higher rate than most other states, and knowing that we've previously had surges come down and then we reopen too early and then another surge happens and then you have to do an even more extreme lockdown. What I asked was like, should that state still be eligible for federal aid to battle the pandemic? It's like if you want the fire department to come and help out your neighborhood, but you're still like having barbecues in the dry backyard or smoking in bed and stuff, should the fire department prioritize your neighborhood? Now, of course, people need help. People are hurting, and they shouldn't be punished for like their crazy governor. But at the same time, just in terms of that money being put to good use, like if I think there's $50 billion that are being targeted for kind of retrofitting schools to improve ventilation and air filtration. So why would you spend $50 billion and part of that in, let's say, Texas to upgrade all these schools if Texas is saying we don't want to wear masks? You know what I mean? Like, how does that work? Like, we don't want to wear masks. We want to pack our bars. We want to pack our indoor restaurants. We don't need you, Washington, D.C., telling us what to do. We can decide for ourselves. But yes, we want all that federal stimulus money that is designed to aid in the recovery and mitigation of a global pandemic that we don't think requires any action on our side. So I just find that contradictory. I would much prefer a state saying, hey, We're in trouble. We're hurting. We're trying to do the right thing. You, federal government, need to help us. In that case, I'd be like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. But with Texas and Mississippi and South Carolina, it's like, well, we don't want to make any of the sacrifices ourselves, but we want to get our share of that money. And part of the challenge here is obviously the citizens of these states. Not all of them are like big, COVID deniers or anything, and many of them are just trying their best, and so they shouldn't be punished for their state's policies. But from an efficacy point of view, why would you retool all of these schools, let's say, if then the kids don't wear masks and they and their parents go into packed restaurants that have no ventilation and no masking and no distancing? Like, how does that work? So, any rate, I just thought I'd share that because I know I got into a lot of trouble and people were like, "You're disgusting. How could you even ask this question?" It's like, well, look, $50 billion is not going to cover all of the needs for all of the state schools. So, should a state whose community has not implemented policies that cost nothing, like requiring masks, should money go to those states even when you're already spreading it so thin? Or should you focus on the states where you can actually make a difference, where there's like a complete multifaceted mitigation plan? So yeah, let me know. Jay Parent is like, yes, it is a conundrum. Caleb says it does seem reasonable that we should ask this question. Nell thinks it's a fair question. So you guys are. Tamar has a comment here. I hear you. I work in a public school. We are using only classroom proper ventilation, mask, distancing, and we are doing contact tracing. Wow. Classroom treated as a pod. Yes, that's what you should be doing. So kudos to your school. But if a state says, yeah, we don't want to do any of that, or we're going to only do that for the schools, but if you're a restaurant or a bar or a retail establishment or a gym, we don't need to do any of that, then it just seems like you're kind of plugging up holes in a ship on one part, but then you're making new holes in other part of the hull, and it's just bringing water in. So, yeah, Tamar saying if you open up, you do it right. Yeah, I mean, if it were up to me, I would want to open up this. I would want the teachers vaccinated, and ventilation, and filtration, and distancing, and weekly testing, and contact tracing. And if a state does all of that, and then applies similar approaches for its retail and restaurants and food and beverage and gyms, then I would say, of course, this state is doing everything it can. And almost because of that, it deserves more federal aid because that is very expensive. But if you're not doing any of that, and then you're like, oh, gimme, I don't know. Doesn't seem fair. Ira says, hello, Tom. Hello, Ira. I think Ira's a member. Pretty sure he is. Any rate, yeah, Leon saying that's my point. If you take the federal, like, if you say on the other hand, like, oh, no, we don't want any federal support. We're, like Texas did with the energy. They're off the grid. They don't want to have anything to do with the rest of the states. They can handle their own business. Then, I mean, this is sort of like the Obamacare mandate, right? Like, if you're gonna expect emergency room treatment at any hospital when you're sick, then when you're healthy, you should probably get some minimum level of health insurance. But if you say, no, I don't want the government doing this, then you can't have it both ways. You can't be like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to take any responsibility. I don't want to make any sacrifices. But then I want everybody else to kind of bail me out. I don't know. I don't think that's really cool. All right. Well, I'll be curious to see what others think. If you find this stream useful and this conversation interesting, please do me a solid. Like, share, subscribe, join, all that great stuff. With that, I'm going to wrap up and say goodbye, nerds. And we are going to fade to black. Goodbye, nerds.